I own it. The world knows.
The return of Conor McGregor at UFC 329 was one of the most statistically significant events in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. To understand why this fight mattered so much, we have to look at the facts of where these two men started. The story began in 2013, in Boston, where a young Conor McGregor faced a 19-year-old Max Holloway. McGregor won that night, but he did it with a torn ACL. That single injury was the first sign of a physical pattern that would define his later career. For Holloway, that loss was the beginning of a legendary run that would eventually lead him to the featherweight title and the BMF belt. Fast forward to 2026, and the landscape had changed. McGregor had spent 5 years away from the cage following his leg break at UFC 264. At 37 years old, he was returning to face a version of Max Holloway that was arguably at the peak of his technical abilities. This wasn't just a rematch, it was a test of whether a body that had suffered multiple catastrophic injuries could still compete with an elite-level athlete who had remained active and evolved. The fight was set at lightweight, a division where Holloway had recently looked dominant and McGregor had historically achieved his greatest success. The lead-up to the fight was defined by record-breaking numbers. The gate was over $25 million, and the pay-per-view interest was at an all-time high. During the fight week, the focus was on McGregor's physical state. He appeared lean and disciplined, claiming that his rehabilitation had made him stronger than ever. However, technical analysts noticed certain behaviors during his cage entrance that suggested a level of caution. McGregor was seen repeatedly wiping his feet on the canvas, a common practice to ensure grip, but in this context, it suggested a hyper-awareness of his stability. As the first round began, McGregor took the center of the octagon, utilizing his wide karate-style stance. Holloway moved laterally, looking to establish his jab and manage the distance. The first minute was a tactical battle of feints and measuring. McGregor landed a couple of solid strikes, but the turning point occurred at the 1 minute and 42-second mark. McGregor attempted a hopping switch kick, a high-level technical move that requires significant torque and stability in the landing leg. As his right foot touched the canvas, his knee buckled inward. This was a non-contact injury, occurring solely due to the mechanics of the landing. Despite the instability, McGregor tried to remain offensive, but his right knee failed to support his weight a second time. Max Holloway recognized the mechanical failure immediately and adjusted his strategy, moving forward to apply pressure and targeting the injured leg with low kicks. The technical breakdown of the injury suggests a failure of a previously compromised joint under high-stress conditions. Holloway landed significant strikes, and recognizing that McGregor could no longer intelligently defend himself, the referee stepped in to stop the contest. The official result was a victory for Max Holloway via technical knockout due to injury. Analyzing the data, Holloway landed 14 significant strikes, while McGregor landed 6 before the injury occurred. The primary factor was a physical failure of the body, raising serious questions about the long-term viability of McGregor's career at 37. For Holloway, this victory keeps his momentum moving forward, positioning him for a shot at the undisputed lightweight title. The documentary of UFC 329 is therefore a record of these facts, a story of a comeback halted by the physical realities of the human body. It is a reminder that in elite athletics, there is a fine line between peak performance and catastrophic failure. To expand on the historical context, we must realize that McGregor's rise was unlike anything the sport had seen. He captured 2 belts simultaneously and crossed over into boxing, but his activity levels dropped. Between 2018 and 2026, he only fought a handful of times. Each return was treated as a major event, but the results were inconsistent. The injury at UFC 264 was particularly devastating, requiring a titanium rod to be inserted into his leg. This history of trauma is essential to understanding why the knee failed at UFC 329. The joint was already compromised, and the specific mechanics of the hopping switch kick placed a load on it that it simply could not handle. Max Holloway, meanwhile, became a model of consistency. He holds the record for the most significant strikes landed in UFC history. His victory at UFC 300 over Justin Gaethje showed that he had the power to compete at lightweight. Entering UFC 329, he was the more active and reliable fighter. His strategy was to use his superior cardio to drag McGregor into the later rounds, but the injury ended the fight before that plan could be fully realized. Holloway's ability to stay calm and execute even in an unexpected situation is what defines his current era. The financial impact of UFC 329 cannot be overstated. It generated massive revenue, proving that McGregor's drawing power remains intact. However, the competitive result serves as a cautionary tale. Aging athletes returning from major trauma face significant risks. The event was a financial triumph but a competitive disappointment. It sparked a global conversation about athlete safety and the ethics of aging legends returning to the octagon. The sport is evolving with a greater emphasis on science and data-driven training, but the fundamental danger of the cage remains. In the post-fight press conference, Dana White confirmed that the event broke all previous gate records. McGregor was taken to a medical facility for MRI scans, with reports suggesting a high-grade tear of the ACL. This type of injury at 37 requires a recovery period of at least a year. For McGregor, this represents a significant hurdle. Whether he ever fights again is now a subject of intense speculation. His impact on the UFC is permanent, but his time as a top-tier competitor may have reached its final chapter. The documentary of this night must be a definitive record of these truths. It must cover the history, the technical build-up, the micro-details of the fight, and the medical aftermath. It is a story of a comeback that was halted by a single misstep, a reminder that in the octagon, the only thing that matters is what happens when the clock is running. Everything else is just noise. The Mac is back, but the body has its limits. The blessed era continues, and the sport moves on, forever changed by the events of UFC 329. McGregor's lead hand was unusually low, a tactic he often uses to bait opponents into overextending, but it also leaves him vulnerable to high kicks. Holloway, aware of this, was testing the guard with feints. The footwork from both men was high level, with McGregor trying to cut off the cage and Holloway using his lateral movement to reset. The injury occurred not during a high-impact exchange, but during a transition, which is often when ligaments are most vulnerable. The medical context of the ACL is also worth exploring in a factual manner. The ACL is responsible for stabilizing the knee joint, especially during pivoting and landing. Once it has been torn and reconstructed, it is never quite the same as a natural ligament. At 37, the blood flow to these tissues is reduced, and the healing process is slower. The hopping switch kick involves a rapid change of direction and a heavy landing on one leg, which is the exact mechanism that puts the most stress on the ACL. The fact that it failed in a non-contact situation suggests that the structural integrity was already near its breaking point. Post-fight, the reactions from the MMA community were split. Some praised McGregor for his courage to return, while others criticized the decision to let a 37-year-old with his injury history compete against a peak athlete like Holloway. The data-driven approach to sports medicine will likely use this fight as a case study for years to come. It highlights the importance of not just physical rehabilitation, but also the assessment of technical risks associated with certain movements for aging athletes. For the UFC, the challenge now is how to move forward. McGregor has been the face of the company for a decade. While they have built other stars, no one quite matches his global reach. Holloway is now in a position to take on that mantle of leadership, representing the active legend who shows up and performs consistently. The lightweight division is currently one of the most talented in the world, and the vacuum left by McGregor's injury will be filled by other top contenders. In conclusion, UFC 329 was an event of immense promise that ended in a clinical reality. The facts show that while the spirit of the competitor may be willing, the physical structure has its limits. As we look at the footage of McGregor being helped out of the arena, we are seeing the potential end of an era. The sport of MMA moves fast, and it waits for no one. The story of UFC 329 is now a part of history, a factual, somber, and definitive chapter in the story of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Further expansion for duration, let's delve deeper into the 2013 fight to draw more parallels. In that first encounter, McGregor's ACL tear happened in the second round, yet he wrestled his way to a win. In 2026, the injury happened in the first round, and the level of competition in Holloway had risen so much that wrestling was no longer an option for a compromised McGregor. This shows the evolution of the sport. In 2013, you could survive an injury against a prospect, but in 2026, you cannot survive an injury against a legend. The foot-wiping ritual also deserves more analysis. Fighters often do this to remove blood or sweat from the canvas to avoid slipping. However, at the start of a fight, the canvas is usually clean. McGregor's repeated wiping suggests he was testing the traction of the surface. This hyperfocus on traction is often a psychological response to a previous leg injury where the fighter lost their footing. It's a factual observation that points to a lack of subconscious trust in the limb. The TKO stoppage by Herb Dean was also a point of discussion. Some fans wanted to see McGregor go out on his shield, but the referee's job is to protect the fighter from themselves. Once the knee buckled for the third time, it was clear that McGregor could not defend himself. Any further strikes from Holloway would have been unnecessary damage. The stoppage was technically correct and medically necessary. Max Holloway's post-fight conduct was also noteworthy. He didn't gloat or mock McGregor. He acknowledged the injury and the magnitude of the moment. This level of professionalism is what has made Holloway a favorite among both fans and fellow fighters. He understood that while he won the fight, the sport had lost a major moment. His focus immediately shifted to what was next, showing the mindset of a true champion who is always looking at the next challenge. As we wrap up this factual breakdown, we must acknowledge that UFC 329 will be remembered as a turning point. It was the night the great comeback narrative met the physical reality of aging. The sport of MMA is the ultimate truth teller. It doesn't care about your past achievements or your fame. It only cares about what you can do in the present moment. And in the present moment of UFC 329, the facts showed that the body has a final say.